Welcome to the latest episode of 5 on the Floor on the 5 Reasons Sports Network. Thanks for joining us on your favorite podcast app. We're recommending that you stream us off Spotify. If you are an Android user, Apple, you can use Spotify or Apple Podcasts. Also, check out the 5 Reasons YouTube channel for all the latest on the other teams in town. Dolphins and Panthers both been making moves over the past couple of days. We'll get to the Heat in a second. Also, check out Off the Floor. That's our Discord server, $2.99 per month. That's where the action is, actually. It's not all people complaining, although – yeah, a lot of it is. The most Heat information, conversation, it's there, 10 different channels. We split everything up for you to make it real easy to follow. Also, get the updates from us before they go anywhere else, including from us to Twitter or anywhere else. Check it out. It's Off the Floor. Pay the $2.99. You can cancel at any time. Also, check out Prize Picks. Use the code 5, F-I-V-E. Put down your $5. You get 50 to play right away. We're going to be doing some WNBA shows. We also got our guys doing MLB shows. So if you play either of those two sports, you can get in there. And there's many other sports to play there as well. Prize Picks, use the code 5, F-I-V-E. And now, today's episode.
Mercy, luxurious, Heat Nation, yeah, Mercy and Lago, down to Biscayne, yeah, 5 on the floor, ride for my dogs. Where here's the thing, you can check the score. Hustle hard, couple scars, wearing bubble frogs. Down to Biscayne, kept the floor playing, got an all band. Y'all seen the block, stop with one hand. And Pat we trust, it's about to have the guts. We're here to bring the heat, y'all can hang it up.
Welcome to 5 on the Floor, a daily insider show on the Miami Heat and the NBA, featuring Ethan Skolnick, Greg Sylvander, Alex Toledo, Brady Hawk, and others from the 5 Reasons Sports Network. Also, make sure to subscribe to Off the Floor for the most heat anywhere.
All right, welcome back to 5 on the Floor. Here's today's floor plan. I'm Ethan Skolnick. You can follow me at Ethan J. Skolnick at 5 Reasons Sports. We got Brady Hawk. You can follow him at Brady Hawk 305. Nobody will ever be able to, test this in any way, but I can tell you I stayed up late in case anything happened last night, and nothing happened, at least for the Miami Heat. So we're recording this at noon on the second day of free agency. We're not even 24 hours into it. We will post this right away, and then as other circumstances require, we will post again. Brady and I are going to get into what we think are the 5 most interesting moves or situations through the first, what are we at now? 18 hours of free agency. So let's get to it. We did not prep this in advance, but we'll get to again as these things are happening. They're happening so quickly that I thought Giannis was going to stay in Milwaukee forever after the move that they made. Well, not forever, but at least for the time being. And then there's a report from Chris Haynes saying that Giannis is not happy that they stretched Dame. So I'm sure that's going to be one of our situations. Should we just start with that one, Brady? What do you think?
Yeah, 100%. That's got to be number one, the Dame situation. Dame and Miles Turner thing kind of go hand in hand. I don't know if those are two separate key points, but they do kind of are linked together here. But I think it was kind of a surprise. I know there was kind of some reports floating around Giannis' situation, because I feel like there's two sides to this, where you see the Chris Haynes report that he's unhappy, and then there's ESPN reports saying that Giannis was involved and was in acquiring Miles Turner and knew the whole thing. So like this could be a situation like it was a few years ago when they traded Drew and got Dame, and they kind of played both sides, and Giannis kind of acted like he didn't have anything to do with it.
Right.
So I don't really buy into that stuff. Like, I don't know if we can lean one way or the other on if Giannis is happy or unhappy, but they definitely are going all in on this situation right now. I mean, they're getting, filling these holes that they're losing in Dame and Brook Lopez, and they're finding different guys to kind of fill in. But the Dame situation is interesting. I mean, we know who he said what was on his list when he originally had the choice of going anywhere. Obviously, that didn't end up working out, but now he really has his own choice. He has the choice of landing anywhere. The question becomes, he's not going to play this season. Now, all of a sudden, he's much past his prime going into the following season about teams that want to acquire him. I think, honestly, if you're going to ask me what makes most sense for Dame, maybe it is just hanging out in Miami and playing basketball here in 2026 or whatever it is. But in reality, he needs to be on a contender, like a good team where he does not have a lot of weight on his shoulders offensively, because it feels like with the way things are heading here in Miami, I mean, if even 2026 comes around, there's going to be too much on his shoulders offensively when that comes around, if he was to, come to Miami.
And also, he'll be older. And look, we're talking about a different thing here for Miami because when we did 58 Dame pods, their concern at the time was age, salary, defense. Now, the age and defense are only going to be worse. He tore an Achilles, but the salary is different. And so it may come down to a cost that makes sense for them to stash him. Also, I don't want to get into too much depth on this, but since we even sat down here to podcast, I've gotten a couple texts from people around the NBA who know about the situation, and they say that some of this may be related to Dame's personal life at the moment, that taking a year off actually will get him closer to his kids than trading him somewhere where he would have had to have worked out for that team and stayed with the team, and there's custody stuff involved and all other kinds of things. So I think there may be more to this, and I don't know necessarily that Dame is going to be as upset at what played out as the perception will be. So I'm just going to put that there without knowing more about it. But that's just something that we may hear about in the next 12 hours. I mean, as far as the Heat's perspective go, it's a cute little sidelight. I mean, we did so many episodes on this. But you're right. I mean, I don't know. I mean, you're going to give him the mid-level to sit around for a year, rehab under you, and then he comes back off an Achilles at what age? Look, he's an all-time player. I mean, he's one of the all-time players. He's a Hall of Fame type player. It was a nice story when they were trying to get him, or at least the perception was they were trying to get him when Jimmy was still around. I don't know. I would have to see what the parameters are of it and what his prognosis is. I think that's part of it. Players have come back. Look, the Achilles thing now, he had the blood clots too. I mean, like the Achilles thing now is like, it's like half of the East stars are out with Achilles injuries, and we don't know how quickly they're all going to come back. When Kobe did it, he was never really the same, but modern medicine's a little bit quicker these days. So we'll see how it plays out. I'm not going to, I know people want me to do a whole bunch of pods on this. I will try to gauge the Heat's interest on it, but I don't think it's like the solution to their problems. Okay. And it would have to be at absolutely the right price. All right, let me get to number 2 but here's the other thing. The Giannis thing is actually more significant. And the Giannis part of this, because if he is angry and he's not just saving face, and I don't know if the Haynes report that he's unhappy like indicates that Giannis is saving face, and it's not true. I know I'm doing a lot of double negatives here, only because Haynes is Dame's guy. So like if it's a show, like Dame would know that. So because he's going through Haynes on it. So that maybe Giannis legitimately is unhappy. I don't know. There was some talk about how, he was definitely, evaluating the situation in Milwaukee, making a decision based on what they did. He wanted to play with Miles Turner reportedly. I still look at that roster and I'm like, that roster is not good enough to compete anyway. So maybe he will want out. I'm not sure, but I do think that these teams that are just holding assets for him, I don't know. It feels like they're going to be holding their assets forever, but I could end up being wrong about that. All right, number 2, most interesting. Oh, you want to jump in on that?
No, let me just go to number 2 because I want to play off of that, because you talk about making Giannis happy, and we could see where this ends up going. But a team that's making their star happy is the Denver Nuggets.
Yes.
Yes. I wonder if Giannis is looking around the league and saying that I wish my team would do that for me, because that's a team that's going all in and improving. Won a championship, is not content with it, and improve the roster. I mean, they make the trade with MPJ to get Cam Johnson. They get Bruce Brown back, and then they just made the deal to acquire Valanciunas as a backup.
Yes.
So I mean, that is some pretty big moves in the Western Conference to kind of improve that roster. I actually really like the Denver Nuggets roster right now as you kind of look at it. But I just kind of tie that into the Giannis situation, just because I feel like there's a lot of stars like Giannis that are looking around and saying, like, you shouldn't be, just always improving the roster. I mean, this is what we talk about here down in Miami, is like, just kind of continue to improve the roster, no matter if you get to a finals, no matter if you're wherever you are, wherever you land. The league is improving, so you have to improve with the league.
Well, especially when you have that kind of player, and you don't want any inkling that he may ask out, especially now that the situation with the Lakers and Luka looks to be a little bit up in the air, at least whether LeBron's going to be there, whether they're going to be looking for another star. I love what Denver's done. I mean, to get Bruce Brown back at that price when he knows the system, I know that Malone's not the coach anymore, but the system is basically the same. And then I love the Cam Johnson trade. I didn't trust Michael Porter Jr. in those situations to have to pay him that much money for, again, inconsistent production in big moments. Like, to get Cam Johnson, who is an elite shooter, I think is going to be a real plus for them. And Valanciunas, yeah, I mean, look, you want to rest your star as much as possible, and he'll allow them to do that. I think they have had a top 3 free agency so far. I don't think there's any question, and they are right back there in the mix in the Western Conference. So we've talked about Denver, we've talked about Milwaukee, which is in flux, and also I can say that the Heat and Milwaukee had some conversations prior to the draft about some things. I don't believe Giannis was one of the things that was discussed, but I was told, and this is not from inside, this was from others who were kind of aware in the negotiations, that it died at the draft. So I don't know if something else is going to be revived. There's been conversation in the media about how Milwaukee has liked Wiggins, but now I have to take a look at what their cap situation looks like. They're going to be stretching Lillard for the next, 4 years? And so there's a lot to kind of dive into there. But I can tell you there's been at least some conversations between those two teams about some things. All right, number 3, I'm looking at the Heat's division and specifically at the Hawks because I feel like they are finally muddling out of the middle. Is that fair?
It's very fair. I mean, there's been these teams that have been linked to each other over the last few years where it's just the play-in bowl between Atlanta, Chicago, and Miami. And yeah, they definitely seem like but the question is if they could stay healthy. I mean, if Atlanta could stay healthy, it does feel like they're going to be out of their range. Of course, we'll see what the situation with Porzingis ends up. But yeah, I really Nickeil Alexander-Walker. I know he's just a really solid player for them. It feels like he fits next to Trey, can do stuff defensively. Their roster just makes a little bit more sense today or kind of this offseason than it did a couple of months ago. So yeah, we'll see who begins it. So the question is, I don't know if this could be a separate team, but they didn't really make moves enough for me to mention them. But the reason why you could see Atlanta jumping up is there are some teams you could see falling back. I mean, we're talking about Milwaukee, what their situation is going to be. I'm looking at how Indiana's going to fill their hole at center now, losing Miles Turner. It just feels like I'm not saying they're going to drop in, far. I still think they have a talented roster, but the next year they're not going to. I mean, you have Halliburton that's going to be out for most of the year. Now you have Miles Turner. It's just going to be Siakam and a bunch of their role players that played well in the postseason. So you have Indiana dropping, you have Milwaukee possibly dropping. Actually, Milwaukee may stay the same. I mean, I still like the Giannis and Miles Turner thing, and they still have, I don't think great role players, but I know I think they picked up Gary Harris. I think they have certain pieces.
They re-signed Trent. Yeah. So, I mean,
Torian Prince, they have their same roster that they did last year. They just switched out to have Miles Turner. They at least have some type of identity. They probably will end up around the same, maybe drop a little. But yeah, I do see Indiana dropping, and it just feels like everything's going to stay pretty much the same. But Atlanta does have the opportunity here to kind of jump up, at least spread their wings a little bit away from the Bulls of Miami.
Well, I still think their biggest weakness ultimately is that their best player can't be Trey. I understand his role as a creator and all that, but they're going to need one of their other guys to pop in a significant way, like Jalen Johnson was last year, or maybe like Risa might. But I think to get seriously out of that tier, that's going to need to happen. We didn't mention the Knicks in there, but they added Yabusele, who I actually think is going to round out their rotation. So they haven't done much, but we'll see what happens with the coach. But I would have to think at this point that the Knicks are favorites in the East. No, I mean, you'd have to start. I mean, with Indiana losing Turner, Philadelphia, I don't know that they get off the mat that quickly. Boston is obviously taking the step back. Orlando, maybe.
Cleveland hasn't.
And Cleveland.
Cleveland is kind of the one team just because by default their roster hasn't but changed unless losing Ty Jerome and stuff like that. But I mean, just by default, I feel like Cleveland's at the top, and that's kind of what is so intriguing about the Eastern Conference. Like we're talking about all these teams. I'm looking at all these players. I mean, everybody's going west. I mean, this is what we always discussed anyway. But it just feels like the team I'm going to mention next. This feels like they're getting all kind of the elite role players, and it's. And I'll just flow right into that. It's the Houston Rockets. I mean, they're getting a lot of these different guys, like Dorian Finney-Smith and Capella, and they're getting guys to kind of round their roster around going all in on Kevin Durant. I'm just looking at all these guys go out west, and the Eastern Conference is kind of wide open. And like you said, the biggest thing out of anything is all the Achilles injuries in the Eastern Conference. Right. It's not just about that. It's the fact that they're not going to be playing next season. There's just such an opening in this Eastern Conference that honestly, the most intriguing thing about the East is that it's the youth, like the young teams, like
Yeah.
Detroit. It's like these teams that are going to be hungry and healthy and young are going to have the biggest opportunity. This isn't like years ago when it's just like all these veteran teams of the Eastern Conference that are just powering their way through the regular season, and then their experience just beating them in the playoffs. This is kind of a different version of the Eastern Conference. So. But yeah, I will say the 4th team that was just intriguing is just the Rockets in general, just because they've kind of went all in. They got their decent role players filling out the roster around KD. I know they signed Jabari Smith to an extension. They brought back Van Vliet. They just kind of did like a lot of stuff to kind of go in. But it's like it's the Western Conference. Like imagine if that team was built in the East, like what we'd be talking about them as.
65 wins. 65 wins. Well, and it looks like now, and I think we can say this, that Durant wasn't wrong to be interested in going there, because they had the maneuverability to surround him with a lot of players that are going to help him. So I think that as you look at the West for this year, I mean, you really could talk about the East being a second division. I mean, it's kind of sad, honestly, what we're looking at, and these teams that lean into youth, as long as they have the right guys to lead it, yeah, they could be top 3 seeds in the East this year. But as we pivot back to the Heat, I still think that more needs to be on this roster before we can even entertain that possibility. All right, on the other side of it, we'll get to our final team that has interested us so far through free agency as we again continue to monitor developments. Before we do, here's who you should reach out to if you're trying to buy or sell your house. It's Real Estate Shop. You can find it at realestateshopfl.com. That's 2 P's and an E. And realestateshopfl.com, the Fort Lauderdale Realtor on Instagram. Javier, Amanda, their team. Javier's following all this free agency stuff. Maybe we'll bring him on at some point. Knows a lot about the Heat, big Heat fans, locals. Broward County, they're all over the place with open houses every weekend. Honest, trustworthy, good people, family people, and they know what will be best for your family. So check it out. It's realestateshopfl.com, the Fort Lauderdale Realtor on Instagram. Okay, who's your 5th? Because I look at a lot. I mean, the Lakers are interesting just because they're interesting, but and they've lost already to Finney-Smith. The LeBron situation's up in the air. We just did a whole podcast on LeBron, though. Anybody else from the West kind of catch your eye?
I'd say Dallas, maybe, just because I feel like D'Angelo Russell is. I mean, I know there's not like a big need for him, and there's different opinions on him, but I think just for a filler for Kyrie until he comes back, I think it's solid, and I think he's just a fine bench piece to kind of add to that roster. I think their roster in general is interesting to see what they're going to be. But if you're to talk about my 5th team, I mentioned them before, but just as I'm looking at the Eastern Conference, I know I just mentioned them, but Detroit, I mean, it does feel like there is an opening for them to kind of, improve the roster. I know it's funny because I know they were one of the teams linked to Duncan if there was a sign and trade. It just feels like they would honestly really improve if they had Duncan on their roster. But they did bring in Karis LeVert. I just think there is an opening for them to kind of really compete in the Eastern Conference this year and just kind of play their style and just they added an isolation scorer to the mix. I think that's kind of what they needed was some extra scoring. They have the defensive roster. They just needed shooting and scoring. They got Karis LeVert, and I probably expect them to get a shooter down the stretch of this offseason.
Yeah, and they had Malik Beasley last year, but he's dealing with the gambling situation. Doesn't look like he's going back there. To me, their whole trajectory is there another level for Cade? Because if there is, after what he did last season, he could be a top 2 or 3 player in the entire Eastern Conference. He really could. You talk about the guys who are out with Achilles injuries, the questions about Embiid. Giannis is obviously going to be one of the 3, but Cade could be right there towards the top of the conference. And, you want to see him get more playoff opportunities because they pushed the Knicks. I mean, they pushed the Knicks. They made the Knicks work. And they will be considered to be a top 4 seed going into the season this year. I think you're looking – I mean, it's hard to – again, Indiana is going to take a step back, no question. I mean, no Halliburton, no Turner. I think you say the Knicks, you say Cleveland, you say Orlando, you say Detroit. I think those probably are the top 4 teams in some order in the East. And then, maybe Philadelphia. There's a lot of talent on that roster. I don't know if, how quickly they can kind of make it gel after what we saw last year. And, I don't know. I mean, beyond that, Atlanta, as we mentioned, right?
So what you're telling me is the Heat are going to sneak into a home playing game this year.
Oh, God. Anyway, I'm going to go chase news. Brady, appreciate it. Brady Hawk 305, realestateshopfl.com. More as things warrant. Of course, if the Heat do anything, that will be immediate. And the Heat will do something while I'm watching my daughters play tonight. Have a good one.